Production of this program has been made possible in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Southern Educational Communications Association, and by the Baton Rouge Audubon Society and Baton Rouge Earth Day, Incorporated.
I think butterflies are really nice because they're like so fragile. They symbolize beauty, nature. They can fly.
Everybody's concerned about the environment now, and butterflies are great environmental indicators.
They basically got the same role as a bee, you know. They move pollen flowers and help flowers reproduce, so other organisms depend on the butterfly.
They're different because they're just so delicate.
They're too graceful to be a bug.
It's our human condition to always seek explanations, to understand more fully the world around us. So what value do we place on wonder, on mystery, and magic? While we extend our dominion of the natural world, what do we stand to lose as tracts of land are cleared and quickly developed? In time, nature always reclaims us from our man-made world. But if we pay attention, we may never feel lost from her embrace. The Victorians were enamored of nature and all of her vast diversity. Collecting and cataloging species after species became their delight, and living collections became the most delightful of all. In this century, we study the behavior and ecology of Earth's creatures and the interdependence that creates a web of life. But in seeking answers to the complexity of our world, we may still enjoy the wonder and beauty of nature, her mystery and magic. Butterflies, like gossamer fairies, await inside crystal palaces, enchanting those who enter with their breathtaking beauty. In Houston, the Cockrell Butterfly Center provides the public with a living collection of both native and exotic species of butterflies. These delicate creatures from faraway lands possess the power to uplift the spirit and to provide an example of the diversity evident in the natural world.
When you come into one of these butterfly conservatories, first of all, you're in an enclosed environment, and so the butterflies can't get away. We maintain fairly high populations of butterflies, much more than you would find in the same little area, say in a pasture or something like that. So I would like to say, 10 or 20 or 30 times more. In our little space here, we try to maintain about 2,000 individuals at any one time. They get very used to people, and so they're very unshy to land on you. You can get right up to them. We encourage people not to touch them, but you can get them to coax them to get on your finger and things like that. And they don't seem to mind. I mean, they're not very shy in nature either, but they're much more wary. We buy most of our butterflies. We raise about maybe a third at this point, but most of the similar butterfly conservatories buy in most of their butterflies. And I would say, on average, we think they cost about $2.50. There's a tremendous range from about $1 to about $6, depending on where they're from and what species it is. My budget, for example, is about $90,000 a year just for butterflies to keep as many as we maintain. One thing, if you're just out in Texas, say, you might see a few of the butterflies that we have in here, but we bring them from all over the world, so you've got a tremendous variety here that you're not likely to see unless you go to Kenya, where one of our farms is, and Costa Rica and El Salvador and Ecuador, and then the Asian tropics too. We get some butterflies from Malaysia and the Philippines. So they all coexist quite happily, but you would never really find them all in one place together. We have to have a permit to bring in the species from abroad. Those countries have to have an export permit since it's wildlife, but we also have to have a permit from the Department of Agriculture. And because caterpillars, baby butterflies, are voracious leaf feeders, the Department of Agriculture, specifically the Department of Plant Protection and Quarantine it's called, is concerned that if one of these exotic butterflies got out and if its caterpillar happened to eat especially some economic crop, that it might be another gypsy moth or whatever. So we do have to demonstrate that we're contained, that the butterflies can't just get out. That's why we have all these double vestibules, and we ask people to check themselves for stowaways, and that's yet another reason to ask people not to handle the butterflies, because we don't want anybody to remove them on purpose or inadvertently.
Some of the butterflies in these exhibits are natives and are raised locally. But butterfly ranching and farming in other countries is the main source of butterflies for conservatories in the United States. In the rainforest, farmers are learning that they can earn more selling butterfly pupae that they have raised than they can by clearing the rainforest to farm or raise cattle. Even species that are endangered can be successfully farmed with just a few adults, because each female lays hundreds of eggs. By protecting these insects from predators, a much higher success rate is ensured. Most farmed butterflies will reach adulthood. And the impact is positive, both economically and environmentally, on undeveloped regions, especially rainforests where many species of butterflies are abundant, reinforcing the value of a self-sustaining resource, the butterflies, and the habitats necessary for their survival in the wild. The advent of overnight shipping by plane makes it simple for butterflies to travel abroad to their new homes during the stage of life where they are most conveniently packaged, the pupa.
This box arrived from Ecuador earlier today. These guys usually write on the inside of their box what should be in the box. 114 chrysalises, or pupae, amongst these species. And actually we're in luck because we have some very pretty little silver ones and some that look like giant yellow jelly beans, as well as some that look like leaves and sticks. And so we'll peel off this cotton and simply get it out of our way. And as you can see, they do a lot of padding here before you actually get to your chrysalises. And the first ones that we've got today are crackers, hamadryas or hamadryas. And as you'll see in a minute, they look just like little leaves.
While in the pupa stage, butterflies must rely upon their shape and coloration for protection. Some species are well camouflaged, resembling dead leaves and stems. Others rely upon bright coloration or metallic sheen to warn predators of a possible toxic content. These chrysalids attached themselves to native plants when entering this dark sleep. Once removed and shipped a continent away, they are carefully pinned to a corkboard from the strands of silk that once suspended them. Difficult to imagine, yet within these bits of leaves and golden charms are living organisms in the process of dissolving structures, readjusting organs, and building a creature of a different and glorious form. A butterfly nursery houses pupae from Asia, Africa, South America. Kept safely beside its relatives from afar, each chrysalis awaits a rebirth, transforming into adulthood and gaining the chance to continue the species. The birth of a butterfly. When this newly formed creature is at its most vulnerable stage, no midwife is at hand to assist. To survive, it must successfully escape the confinement of the chrysalis, and then pump fluid into its wings. Unfurling the proboscis, the butterfly joins together both sides, creating the organ it will use to sip nectar and other fluids. And then the wings must dry. One last long wait before the butterfly can finally take flight. Within a butterfly conservatory, like this one at the Audubon Zoo in New Orleans, newly emerged butterflies are released each day into the confines of their glass-enclosed habitat. Temperatures are kept in the 80s and humidity is near 80%, conditions enjoyed by most butterfly species. Besides an abundance of flowers, nectar is available to butterflies through other forms, and the juices of ripe fruit are a popular source of food. Conservatories are the perfect place to examine and compare the colorful patterns that butterflies employ to protect themselves in nature. Monarch butterflies have a distinctive pattern. They and their close relatives contain toxins from the milkweed that their caterpillars eat. A predator would find them quite distasteful. Other butterfly species, like the viceroy, aren't toxic. But since they resemble the monarch, their mimicry serves to fool predators into thinking that they, too, are best left uneaten. There are many types of butterflies whose patterns serve to give them the best possible camouflage within their habitat. Dead leaves, complete with veins and stems, don't make for an appetizing meal. Contrasting stripes, like those on the zebra swallowtails, serve to confuse predators. Where does the insect begin and end? It's hard to see what form it takes when the fluttering wings create a blur. The hair-streak butterflies slowly rub their hind wings together while feeding. The slender extensions of their wings resemble antennae and may fool a predator into attacking the wrong end of the butterfly. A hair-streak can still survive if just a bit of its wing is lost. These large and showy butterflies have another defense strategy. Flashing huge eye spots resemble owls that can frighten attackers who would rather not tangle with a bird of prey. But the delight of butterfly conservatories everywhere are the flashy blue morphos. Once the collector's prize, nothing can compare with seeing these bright bits of sky gliding through the canopy or chasing each other through forest paths. Butterflies and moths belong to the great order of insects called lepidoptera, which means scaly-winged. Their intricate patterns and bright colors are formed by tiny scales, arranged somewhat like roof tiles along their wings. In the case of the iridescent morphos, it's refraction of light, not coloration, that gives them their special shine. Their scales are actually brown, but the unique surface of their scales breaks up light into component colors, reflecting certain colors while absorbing others. There are always exceptions to any rule, and these butterflies are some of the few who have no scales or just a scattering of them on their wings. These gossamer beauties, resembling fairies, float on clear wings in the darkest recesses of the rainforest. As the study of butterflies continues, many more surprises are in store for us, but the popularity of these most beautiful of bugs is unmistakable.
What I hope is that they, once they get interested, and I think people are getting more interested in the whole life cycle, and instead of calling us to find out how to get rid of those caterpillars, they're calling to find out where to get more plants to feed them, which is just great. So I think that maybe this, along with having to use biological controlled beneficial insects to kill the bad insects in your garden, this is just increasing awareness of the importance of insects and the natural world in general. That's what I hope, anyway.
The Japanese have a folktale that explains the existence of butterflies. A mountain in Japan reaches up to the sky, up to heaven itself. Among the fairies that live atop the mountain, 2 of them decided to travel from there to enjoy themselves upon the earth. When the 2 fairies were discovered to be missing, the general of the fairies was sent to get them. But the 2 fairies were having fun and didn't want to return. So they turned themselves into butterflies and flew away. The general, angered by the fairies, decided to lop off the top of the mountain, so the butterflies can never return to heaven. Today, the butterflies remain with us, and you can still see the flat top of that mountain.
The study of butterflies isn't always done in a laboratory. Information about their habitat and the importance of the butterfly's role in it is what the field entomologist gathers.
To understand how an animal lives, one should live with the animal. And it doesn't make any difference whether it's a large primate like a chimpanzee or something small and fragile like a butterfly. As a field entomologist, I have spent my life tracking butterflies, trying to understand how they interact with one another, how they interact with their environment, what role they play in their ecosystem. And my travels have taken me to exotic places like Madagascar and Indonesia, Africa, and some not so exotic places like Mount Magazine, Arkansas, where we are today. And Mount Magazine, Arkansas is one of these very special places in the United States. It's the highest point between the Appalachians and the Rockies, the highest point in the Midwest. And it has an extraordinary diversity of butterflies. Arkansas has recorded just 127 breeding butterfly species. Yet on top of Mount Magazine, within no more than a 2 square mile area, I have over the last 6 years recorded 87 of those species. This is a very high percentage of butterflies, a tremendous diversity.
For Dr. Gary Noel Ross, the focus of his recent studies has been a large and very beautiful butterfly called the Diana. In this species, the male and female are dimorphic. They are colored very differently. The Diana occurs in the Great Smoky Mountains, but then is found nowhere else but in a small section of northwestern Arkansas and occasionally western Oklahoma. To learn the secrets of their life cycle, Dr. Ross must spend much of his time living with the butterflies.
Dianas are forest creatures. They don't typically enter cities. They don't typically enter any human-inhabited area. They're woodland species, and you have to search them out and stay with them. I spend week after week of each year up here trying to decipher, trying to pry out some of the intricacies of its life cycle. And I have gotten it, and so I'm going to take it out of the net.
To follow these creatures individually, they must be marked and then carefully observed.
Trying to be careful not to damage his legs, his antennae, his wings, because they're very, very delicate, and butterflies cannot repair themselves when they are damaged. So I'm going to take him out, and he is unmarked. He has no number on him. So he's one of the males I have not seen before. So I'm going to take a pen out, and it's a felt tip pen with a permanent ink, and I'm going to put on him number 32, because 31 was the last one I had marked. So this will be male number 32, and then I'm going to record that in my notebook. And then I'm going to put this butterfly back on a coneflower in relatively the same position I had caught him.
By using special close focusing binoculars, Dr. Ross can recognize individual marked butterflies without needing to recapture them. Watching and recording the movements and habits of these butterflies, he is able to determine their range, their lifespan, the population size, and their preferences in food sources.
To be a field entomologist, one also has to be a field botanist, because butterflies and plants are tied very closely. Their lives interact continually, because butterflies not only use plants as sources of food, they feed on the sugary substances we call nectar, but they also lay their eggs on them. They use plants as host plants in order to complete their reproduction. So one basically has to be a plant taxonomist to be a field entomologist as well. A lot of people think that butterflies will feed nectar on just about any flower. That's not true. Many butterflies are very picky about what they feed on. And on Mount Magazine, that is very, very evident. And part of my work is trying to find out why the butterflies are particularly interested in these plants in this particular section of the world. I've come to the southeastern slope of Mount Magazine, to this wildflower meadow, which is maintained by lightning-caused fires, because it has an extraordinary abundance of wildflowers. and in particular, one that is a virtual magnet for almost any butterfly in the vicinity. And here it is right here. This is orange milkweed, or butterfly weed, so called because it does attract large numbers of butterflies. Apparently the flowers are very, very rich in nectar. The plant, though, is also the host plant for the monarch butterfly. Female monarchs will lay their eggs on the leaves of the plant, and the caterpillars will consume the leaves during their life cycle. One of the other favorite nectar sources for butterflies is purple coneflower. And here we have a male Diana, fairly bad shape, but on a purple coneflower. He is unmarked, so it's an individual that I have not seen before. This is the area I call my secret garden. And by that I mean it's not well known, it's off the beaten track, but it is really a very beautiful area. It's an old cabin site, but it has this lovely concentration of purple coneflower, some other daisies and milkweed, and I can always count on butterflies being here. There is somewhat of a degree of urgency to my butterfly surveys up here because Mount Magazine is finally going to become a state park. The problem with that is, obviously, before the park is finished, there's going to be a tremendous amount of destruction of native habitat. So it is imperative that we find out what are sensitive areas for butterflies. It's also imperative that we find out just what the butterfly populations were like here before any activity, major activity started to take place with the park development. And so now we have 6 years of data, a baseline for the butterfly population. It would be nice to have this kind of line for all species of animals and plants, but we don't. At least we have it for butterflies. And since this area is very special for butterflies, has such a tremendous high concentration of butterfly species, it's important for us to take them into consideration as the development takes place.
Although cabins will once again be built atop Mount Magazine, one area of the mountaintop has been set aside to remain undeveloped. Within this area, the U.S. Forest Service is conducting experiments to see the effect of fire on the development of a diversity of wildflowers, the food source for butterflies.
This section that I'm standing in right now was burned heavily just 4 months ago. Yet you can see that there is a plethora of wildflowers here, particularly purple coneflower, which is a species that responds very well to periodic burnings, and of course is one of those magnet plants that butterflies love. Butterflies are so intricately tied in with plants. If we maintain, if the new park that goes in maintains a high concentration of butterflies, that means it's going to be maintaining a high concentration of naturalness. And so this is going to be a basis for ecotourism for the area. Those people who are interested in seeing nature, in seeing exquisite examples of nature, will find this park one of the gems, not only within Arkansas, but within the United States as a whole.
Native American peoples embraced the natural world and all its creatures. The Papago Indians tell this legend about how the butterflies came to be. After the earth was formed, our elder brother walked about. He saw flowers blooming, and the bright leaves on the trees, and children playing. His heart felt full of joy. Then he thought of how the children would grow old and weaken and die, and how the leaves would fall and the world would become cold, and he became sad. Elder brother noticed the yellow leaves dancing in the wind, and he decided to make something to make his heart glad again. So he took a bag and gathered into it the bright-colored flowers, fallen leaves, yellow pollen, and green pine needles, and the shining gold of the sunlight. There were birds singing around him, so he took some of their songs and put them into the bag too. Then elder brother called the children together and handed them the bag. "Open it," he said. And as the children opened the bag, out flew the first butterflies. Their wings were bright as sunlight and held all the colors of the flowers and leaves, the pollen and the pine needles. They looked like flowers dancing in the wind, and they sang beautiful songs to the children. And the children laughed as the butterflies flew about their heads. But the songbirds were not happy. They came to Elder Brother saying, "Those songs were given to us. It's fine that you should give these new creatures the brightest colors, but it is not right that they should have our songs too." And Elder Brother agreed with them, saying, "You speak truly. The songs belong to you and not to the butterflies." So although the butterflies dance as they fly, today they remain silent. But when the children see them dancing in the wind, their hearts dance with them. And that is how Elder Brother meant it to be.
Within the urban setting of New Orleans, butterflies have found a friend and a spokesperson who has the ironic position of running a pest control company.
Hi, I'm Linda Auld, better known as the Bug Lady of New Orleans. And I own and operate Barber Laboratories, where I sell death, but I promote life. I started off working here as a secretary for my father. This is a 3-generation-old business that my grandfather started in 1921. When my father decided to retire, someone had to start learning the bugs. So my husband and I decided to go out into the field and collect bugs and bring them back and raise them and see how their life cycle progresses and learn about them instead of trying to pick up a book and memorize all the bugs that are in our area. I try to get people to realize that there are beneficial insects out there and they should try to observe them before they decide to squash them. They could be something that could eat that actual pest that's in the yard, such as ladybugs, lacewings, praying mantids. There's a food chain going on out there for each bug that there is. I'm sure there's something out there that wants to eat them. There are certain things that need to be sprayed, ticks. Nobody wants those, so yes, you're going to have to spray the yard. Termites, you don't want them eating your house, so you got to treat your house for that. But there are a few things out there, if you just wait and let nature do its course, some things will just take care of itself. I like to share my bugs with the customers that come into my shop because so many of them live in concrete jungles that they don't have a chance to come up and be personal with these insects. So I have the insects in the aquariums and critter condos, and people love to look at them. So many people tell me that they just don't see butterflies anymore, and it really hurts me. So I try to raise as many butterflies and release them back to nature as possible to try to get the balance going back again. So many beautiful forests that we once walked through are now condominiums, so habitat destruction is the main problem with butterflies. And when you see a lot of butterflies around, it's usually an indication that you have a healthy environment. So I'm glad when I see those butterflies skipping around my yard because I know I have a healthy environment for them.
And in the Bug Lady's backyard, besides enjoying the food and shelter she provides, butterflies just might find themselves participating in a University of Kansas study.
The Monarch Watch program is very interesting to me because we can study the migration habits of the butterfly. They sent us the tags with the glue and gave us the instructions on how to tag the monarchs. And there is a little bit of record keeping with that, in that you have to keep up with the numbers of the tags and whether they're male or female, and when you release them and where you release them, so that once these tagged monarchs are found, they can document where they came from. You ready to go now, buddy? Here he goes. There are 2 ways you can get the monarch butterflies. You can either raise them like I do, or you can go out in the wild and catch the migrating monarchs. So both the data on both of these is important. In my shop, I raise the monarch caterpillars, and when they become the adults, I have school children that visit me on their way home from school every day, and they help me tag them and release them. And in our report, as we document all the information, we name the boy butterflies after the boys, and we name the girl butterflies after the little girls. And the children love the fact that a butterfly has been named after them. Plus, when we look back at the report, we can see who was there that day. So it's great fun for both of us, and I think the butterflies like it too. And of course, when they do release it, they get to make a wish, which is even better. I mean, after all the trouble we've gone to feeding these caterpillars, at least we should get something out of it, so we get a wish.
To make a wish come true, Native Americans would whisper it to a butterfly, which would carry it to the Great Spirit in heaven, and there the wish would be granted.
The migration of the monarch butterfly is truly one of nature's wonders. Throughout the summer, several generations of monarch butterflies populate the United States, each butterfly only living a few weeks. But monarchs that emerge in the fall will move southward in a mass migration to their wintering grounds in the cool highlands of Mexico, where they survive the winter months living off stored fat and conserving their energy for a return flight north in the spring, just in time to lay their eggs and then die. The monarch population then renews itself by breeding on their only host plant, milkweed, and waves of succeeding generations move northward as the summer progresses. When migrating monarchs first reach our shores in the spring, they can find sanctuary on Louisiana's coast, in an area preserved for migrating birds and butterflies.
We are at the Pivotal Woods Bird Sanctuary and Butterfly Sanctuary. It was established in the beginning as a bird sanctuary, but it became obvious that we needed the butterfly sanctuary as well. So much of the cheniers were being destroyed that we decided we needed to have an area, especially along the coast, that was preserved for butterflies and birds.
This coastal area is the first land that they'll hit coming back from Mexico, and it's really a sight to see when you see them hit the beaches and the woods, and they're just, every plant, every tree is just covered with these butterflies.
This is a weed.
These are weeds, huh?
Volunteers from the Gulf Coast Bird Club created a butterfly garden welcoming weary travelers crossing the Gulf of Mexico.
This sanctuary is a wonderful place for migrating butterflies. I've seen the monarchs in here on the trees all up and down, and it's been great. And other butterflies come here, and they land here just as the birds do. They rest here and they feed here, and that's why we have the nice plants in our sanctuary, not only in the butterfly garden, but in the rest of the sanctuary.
The importance of this small section of coastline to migrating birds was already established when Dr. Gary Noel Ross made some new findings about monarch migration that emphasizes the value of coastal cheniers to butterflies.
Most of the Louisiana coast is a treeless labyrinth of marshlands and water. Not very good habitat for butterflies looking for places to rest, to feed, and perhaps even reproduce. However, in extreme southwest Louisiana, there's a topographic feature called a chenier, literally in French, place of oaks. These are ancient beach ridges that rise several feet above the Gulf waters and were originally heavily forested with hardwood trees, principally oaks. However, the high ground is also conducive for large numbers of wildflowers, which furnish food and reproductive sites for large numbers of butterflies. Each fall, monarch butterflies from east of the Rocky Mountains gradually make their way southward to the Gulf Coast. Whereas most of these butterflies will move through Texas in order to get to their overwintering grounds in central Mexico, a large number of them actually use the cheniers of southwest Louisiana as staging grounds to begin what I have christened the Trans-Gulf Express. In 1991, I was privileged to research this Trans-Gulf flight by being aboard a gas production platform 70 miles south of the Louisiana cheniers in the Gulf of Mexico. There in mid-October, following the passage of a cold front, large numbers of monarchs descended upon the platform. And by coordinating activities with helicopter pilots that were flying the entire Gulf, I was able to document that monarchs were landing at the same time aboard other platforms. By plotting this on a map, it was obvious that the monarchs had a flyway that was extending from the southwestern corner of Louisiana to the northeastern coast of Mexico. By using this Trans-Gulf Express, they were able to cut off 200 to 300 miles of flying time. The research also showed that monarchs, contrary to popular belief, were able to fly over large bodies of water for extended periods of time and also during nighttime hours. Some of the butterflies would spend the entire night on the platform, reserving their energies to continue their flight the next day. During the spring migration the following March, large numbers of monarchs used this same route to get to the Cheniers, where they found abundant sources of food and also abundant milkweeds to begin their next generation.
Because there are so many landowners that have limited their access to their lands, this is very important because it's the only place that we can come to and feel free to just observe nature, come and go as we like, and see nature in its best.
The insect world is like a miniature jungle, full of the drama of life and death, the will to survive and procreate. And like in the jungle, this is an insect safari. It takes place each year near the 4th of July as members of the Xerces Society and the North American Butterfly Association take a census of butterfly species and populations within designated areas.
The butterfly counts are very similar to the Audubon Christmas bird counts, and with exception that they were started in 1975, whereas the bird counts started at the turn of the century. We collect data, it's statistical data, it's baseline data as to what species are in a certain given area. The center of the count is a 15-mile diameter circle. The counts are certainly open to everyone, and there are always people who will help and instruct other people. At least that's been my experience. They can't wait to show somebody something that they know.
Small brown skippers are among the most difficult to ID, and having an expert along always helps.
We've had an awful lot of fun doing this too.
Butterfly collections stir up memories of childhood, time spent examining hungry caterpillars, mysterious cocoons, and wondrous winged beauties. For 14-year-old Dar Hines, this new hobby has opened a door to the world of entomology.
It has been very fun for me to go out and catch butterflies and then take them home and look through all my books and find out what they are and then carefully pin them and put them in my collection. I have many other interests, which include rock climbing, fishing, and just generally tramping around the bayou and doing very boyish things, which include climbing trees, which is one of my most favorite things to do. But in butterflies, I found something that I enjoy much more than all of my other hobbies. I got interested in butterflies about a year or so ago when I visited the Cockerel Butterfly Center in Houston. Since then, my interest has grown into many things, one of which is raising butterfly and moth caterpillars. This also gives me a chance to see the life processes, the life cycle, and watch them as they grow. I have a moth collecting set up in my backyard. It is a mercury vapor lamp, and it attracts many moths when you turn it on at night. This is my butterfly and moth garden. This is a flowering tobacco plant, and it attracts moths at night that have very long tongues and feed on the deep-throated flowers. I also have lots of butterfly plants, including fennel and penta and lantana. I'm learning about many of the plants that attract butterflies, and I'm trying to find out which ones work best for this area.
The Butterfly Lovers is a story from a Chinese folk tale of the Yin Dynasty. Zhu Yingdai, an ambitious and strong-minded girl, wanted to study in Hangzhou, but tradition prevented girls from any education. She finally persuaded her parents to allow her to study, accompanied by her maid, both of them disguised as men. During Zhu Yingdai's studies, She fell in love with a poor scholar called Liang Shanbo. But soon the time comes for her to leave Hangzhou, since her parents have arranged for her to be married. They've chosen for her a rich young man, but he is an idler, and such a marriage could bring no happiness. Ying Dai is in despair. She reveals her identity to Shanbo and arranges to meet him. But he dies of chagrin at the news of her proposed marriage. On the wedding day, everyone is alarmed because Ying Dai stops the wedding procession to visit Shanbo's tomb. And as she weeps by his graveside, it opens, and she leaps in to join her dead lover. The two are changed into butterflies and live in happiness.
Loss of habitat is the #1 cause of declining butterfly populations. As areas become developed, butterflies often lose their homes. How do we replace the meadows, fields, and forests that butterflies require? People who choose to garden for butterflies have a different approach to gardening.
I'm an island in a sea of Augustine grass. I've planted for the butterflies, so we have more of them. Sometimes they'll fly over to the neighbor's yard and give them a little thrill. They don't know where they came from, maybe, but they've come from over here. People put out food for birds, but they don't realize that the birds need larvae to eat, to feed their young. And they can't eat just bird seed. They need more than that. They need meat. And this is where they get it, the supermarket. Tiger swallowtail burgers, filet of giant swallowtail, or filet of hackberry butterfly.
In urban areas, the chance to connect with nature is even more of a challenge. By establishing butterfly habitats in public gardens, visitors can enjoy the beauty and tranquility of these unique settings. And by taking notes on what they see, gardeners can easily collect information about what plants are most useful in attracting butterflies to their own gardens at home. Milkweeds for the monarch butterfly, passion vine for fritillaries and the zebra longwing, Buddleia, hyacinth bean vine, and buttonbush, all excellent nectaring sources for the butterfly garden. You'll even find some flowers that look like butterflies themselves. Businesses can create butterfly gardens too, providing an attractive area for butterflies and for customers.
When we moved the shop to Government Street, which is in the middle of Baton Rouge, we were very fortunate that there was a patch of land in back an oasis that we were able to develop as a wildlife habitat. We planted plants that are beneficial for butterflies, hummingbirds, and birds, such as bog sage, pineapple sage, lantana, that butterflies can lay their eggs on. They can feed off of the plants also.
Butterfly gardening calls for certain strategies. Sunlight is a necessity. Butterflies cannot regulate their temperature, so they rely upon sunlight to warm them. When they get cold, they cannot fly, so they bask in the sun. Sunlight is also needed by nectaring plants, those flowering plants that use the sun's energy to bloom and provide the nectar that butterflies seek out for food. But just as important in a butterfly garden are host plants. These plants have co-evolved with butterflies and have become essential to the caterpillar's survival. The female butterfly will taste the plants with her feet, looking for a certain chemical signal that tells her this is the right food source for her species. Caterpillars are born to eat and grow. Their ravenous appetites keep the plant world in balance, and most caterpillars become food themselves for other creatures in a healthy garden. But plants, in an effort to protect themselves, have developed different chemicals, some of them quite toxic, to prevent animals from eating them. The caterpillars of certain butterflies have found a way to get around these defenses, so that now the caterpillars even require the chemicals of these particular plants to survive. So to get butterflies in your garden, plant what the caterpillars will eat.
I buy a lot of my plants from native nurseries in the area. Sometimes the regular nurseries will have them because it's a demand, such as milkweed. If they think there's a demand, they'll they'll offer that. There are a lot of mail order catalogs. I love to go through those. And there's always something I need. I never have all of it. I'm always looking for new plants, anything that they'll use.
Caterpillars have a few ways of protecting themselves. Some have protective coloration, like the monarch. This giant swallowtail is camouflaged as a bird dropping. And like all swallowtails, when it is threatened, it emits a musty smell while flashing its osmeteria to startle attackers. Some caterpillars resemble small snakes, while others have fierce-looking spines. But no butterfly caterpillars in North America actually sting. Moth caterpillars, however, will find their way into your garden, and there are some you won't want to touch. The buck moth caterpillar, commonly found feeding on oak trees. The saddleback caterpillar has a rather interesting, alien-looking form, but will give you a sting. And the Io moth caterpillar is better left alone as well. Butterfly gardens often create habitats for lots of other creatures.
Originally I was doing hummingbird gardening and planting a bunch of plants to attract hummingbirds. And it turns out, fortunately, that the butterflies are also attracted to the hummingbird plants. One thing I would suggest to people who are starting out butterfly gardening is to refrain from the use of pesticides. Both hummingbirds and butterflies will stay away from any plants that have a lot of pesticides, or if they do come, it will only harm them.
Butterfly gardening often lends itself to an added hobby, rearing caterpillars and creating a backyard butterfly house.
This greenhouse is a little extension to our butterfly gardening. What we like to do is that to experiment with breeding butterflies so that we can release them in the garden, and also to put them in the greenhouse where we can enjoy it flying around. And by breeding them in the greenhouse, the success rate is much higher than leaving the butterflies, the caterpillars, to survive in nature. In nature, most of them were eaten by birds, and only about 5 to 10% of them survive as turn into butterflies. Whereas in the greenhouse, under artificial conditions, we can have a success rate of like 90%. And we have so much butterflies that we can release them back to our backyard, and or keep some in the greenhouse for our relaxation and enjoyment.
At the Mercer Arboretum in Houston, Texas, Don Olhausen raises butterflies and moths and cares for a wide assortment of plants that they need to complete their life cycle.
A lot of us don't realize the importance of trees to the landscape as host plants for butterflies. You take this Hercules club for an example. It's a small tree, but it's a very, very important host plant for the giant swallowtail. And we have an egg on this leaf, and we have a second instar larvae on this branch. The same thing with this orange tree, which you can also incorporate in your landscape, is another very good host plant. They usually oviposit their eggs on the freshest of leaves, the tenderest of leaves on the very tips. To my right here is what we call the wafer ash or the hop tree, which is common throughout the eastern part of Texas and is also a very important host plant for the giant swallowtail.
The gentle art of butterfly gardening is a way for homeowners to have a personal window on the local environment. Not only can you enjoy a garden full of flowers, but what Native Americans called dancing flowers, the butterflies that will frequent your backyard.
In this Pueblo legend from the American Southwest, the playful and joyous aspect of butterflies is evident. One morning, Coyote was, as usual, napping in the sun when his wife came to him and said, "Coyote, please go to the big salty lake to get salt for me. I need it for cooking." Coyote lazily arose, took a sack, and headed out for the big salty lake. After the long journey to the lake, the coyote said to himself, "What a good coyote I am. I've traveled all this way in the hot sun. Now I deserve a nap." Before long, he was fast asleep. Near the big salty lake lived many beautiful butterflies. They noticed the sleeping coyote, and one of them exclaimed, "That lazy coyote, sleeping when he should be gathering salt. Let's play a trick on him." The butterflies flew down, and each took hold of a hair in Coyote's fur. Together, and with much effort, they were able to lift him off the ground. Coyote slept soundly as the butterflies flew with him back over the mountains to his home. The butterflies flew in crazy patterns in the sky, laughing all the way back to the meadow. When Coyote woke up, he wondered how he had gotten back home. And when his wife saw him yawning beside his empty sack, she was very upset. "You lazy coyote, why didn't you get my salt?" Coyote promised that the very next morning he would go get the salt. The next day, Coyote set out for the big salty lake, and this time he took a shortcut. But he arrived there more tired than ever. Still determined, he filled his whole sack with salt. "My, what a thoughtful coyote I am! My wife will be so proud of me," he thought. He decided that he had time for just a short nap. So he settled into the sand, and soon he was sound asleep. The butterflies were waiting for Coyote again, but this time they felt sorry for him. They each grabbed a hair and lifted him once again, but this time some of them also took hold of the threads from his heavy salt sack and lifted that too. Once again they flew over winding canyons and rocky mesas, golden in the evening light. They dropped Coyote and his sack at home just as the sun was setting. As soon as he awoke, Coyote saw that he was home again and yipped in frustration. Then he noticed his sack filled with salt. Now he was really puzzled. But he took the sack to his wife and said proudly, "I brought you the biggest sack of salt you ever saw." Coyote's wife cooked enough to feed herself and Coyote and all their friends. Even today, butterflies remember the trick that was played on Coyote. They flutter high and low, laughing too hard to fly straight, all day long in the yellow sunshine.
Throughout history, the butterfly design has been important in art. Within the textile arts from Oaxaca, southern Mexico, we have an example of a vision of paradise as seen through the eyes of the goddess of the blue morning glory.
Many groups of people in Central and South America worshipped butterflies. Flowers, butterflies, and water were sacred symbols of the Aztecs, Incas, and Mayas. Butterflies were venerated by the ancient Mexicans and at times worshipped as their god of love and beauty. Butterfly eggs were called ahua papalotl, seeds of happiness. Butterflies were also associated with the symbols of heat, light, and regeneration, and the goddess of the earth and stars. However, in the pre-Columbian world, butterflies were often connected with war and violence and human sacrifice. Eventually, when the god-king Quetzalcoatl abolished human sacrifice, butterflies were burnt alive as a sacred replacement. The butterfly repeatedly symbolizes the soul throughout many cultures. The Greeks had but one word for the two, psyche. It meant both soul and butterfly. Throughout the centuries, the butterfly reappears in our tales, our art, even our dreams, offering hope, rebirth, and resurrection. Art historians suggest that the white butterfly represents virtue and immortality, while darker butterflies, like the red admiral, black and scarlet in color, symbolize death or damnation. In folk tales, red butterflies were witches. Certainly many butterflies have been depicted solely for their unparalleled colors and patterns. Butterflies are perhaps the best symbol we have for the transformation into a spiritual world, and those who deal with the dying know the power of such symbolism.
Hospice of Baton Rouge decided to have a butterfly release as part of our memorial service 2 years ago. The butterfly is a universal symbol of hope and rebirth, and so we decided that we would have a butterfly release. because we want to reaffirm the lives of the loved ones that have gone before us and give their loved ones hope for the future and hope for the transformation that many transformations that we make as we go through life.
Production of this program has been made possible in part by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Southern Educational Communications Association, and by the Baton Rouge Audubon Society and Baton Rouge Earth Day, Incorporated. A companion softcover book to this program is available for $14.95. Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Butterflies by Dr. Gary Noel Ross features 52 pages with drawings and diagrams and an easy question and answer format that's handy for all ages. To order, call 1-800-973-7246. A VHS copy of An Enchantment of Butterflies is also available for $29.95. To order, call 1-800-973-7246 or write to the address on your screen.